Rodolphe Desdunes. Rodolphe Lucien Desdunes, November 15, 1849, August 14, 1928, was an African-American civil rights activist, poet, historian, journalist, and customs officer primarily active in New Orleans, Louisiana. In Louisiana, he served as a militiaman during the Reconstruction era and was involved in the Battle of Liberty Place. Later, he was a member of L'Union Louisianaise and wrote for the weekly of the same name. He also wrote for the daily paper, the Crusader, and taught at the Couvent School in New Orleans. In 1890, he was among the founders of the Comité des Citoyens, which fought the 1890 Separate Car Act through legal challenges, leading to the U.S. Supreme Court case, Plessy vs. Ferguson, 1896. He also wrote an important French-language history of Creoles in America called Nos Hommes et Notre Histoire, the first such book written in French by a member of the Louisiana Creoles of Color. Later in life he moved to Omaha, Nebraska, where his son Daniel had settled. Life. Rodolphe Lucien Desdunes was born November 15, 1849, as one of at least 5 children of Pierre Jeremy Desdunes and Henriette Angelique Santi Gaillard. Their father, Pierre, lived in New Orleans at least as early as 1840 and was probably born in the city. The Desdunes family had come from Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, and likely fled to New Orleans during the 1791 Haitian Revolution. They were free people of color. Rodolphe's education was likely provided by family and family friends Armand Lannes and Joanie Questi, as well as at the Couvent School. Rodolphe's brother Pierre Aristide also became involved in civil rights as an adult. By profession, he was a poet, a cigar maker, a carpenter, and owner of a tobacco plantation. He fought in the American Civil War. He served on the board of directors of the Couvent School, which had been created by Marie Couvent in 1848. In 1873, Aristide married Louise Mathilde Denneberg. Rodolphe married Mathilde Cheval, and they lived for some time with her mother, also named Mathilde. Before 1880, they had children: Daniel, born in about 1873, Agnes about 1873, Louise about 1874, Caritza born in 1876, and Wendell born winter 1876-1877. The Chevals may have descended from early Cheval settlers of the Treme district, Pierre and Leander. In 1879, Rodolphe started a relationship with Clementine Walker, born in 1860, and a daughter of John and Ophelia Walker. Rodolphe and Clementine had at least 4 children: Mary Celine, March 25, 1879, John Alexander, 1881, Louise, 1889, and Oscar Alphonse, 1892. Clementine died on September 23, 1893. Mary Celine later became known as Mamie Desdunes and was a blues pianist. Clementine lived near Jelly Roll, Morton's godmother, and Jeremy and Henriette Desdunes were neighbors of Morton's mother. From this proximity, Morton learned the song he recorded as Mammy's Blues or 219 Blues and attributed it to Mammy, singing, "Can't give a dollar, give a lousy dime, / I wanna feed that hungry man of mine." Other associates of Mammy included performer Bunk Johnson and promoters Hattie Rogers and Lulu White. Mammy married George DeGay in 1898 and died of tuberculosis on December 4, 1911. Oscar was also a musician. After his nephew Clarence's death in 1933, Oscar played with his band, the Joyland Revelers. Rodolphe had 3 other daughters, possibly by Clementine, named Edna, Lucille, and Jean, born about 1893. Militia. In the early 1870s, during Reconstruction, Desdunes was a member of the New Orleans Police Department. In 1874, under the command of former Confederate General and then Adjutant General of the Louisiana Militia James Longstreet, Desdunes was among the injured in the Battle of Liberty Place, fought between the pro-Republican city, state, and federal forces, and a pro-Democratic, largely ex-Confederate group called the White League. His experience was important to him. He remained a strong supporter of the rights and honors due to the Black veterans of the United States Civil War. Political and civil service. Desdunes began to attend law courses at Straight University in the early 1870s. He graduated with a bachelor's of law from Straight University in the spring of 1882. Desdunes was appointed in 1879 as secretary of the Parish Vice Committee upon the resignation of Charles A. Bacqui. He was an active member of the Odd Fellows and translated rituals of his lodge, La Creole, into French. Also, he was a member of Lodge Amite Sincere No. 27. In 1891, he was elected secretary of the Republican State Central Committee in Louisiana. He was a frequent contributor to Republican politics. In 1892, he was a speaker in a Louisiana Republican organizational rally, calling on blacks to support more moderate candidates with strong Louisiana ties. In 1897, Desdunes' activity included the support of Louisiana State Senator Henry DeMaz, denouncing lynching, calling for more schools, opposing the poll tax, and denouncing the Constitutional Convention, which he felt sought to deprive black suffrage. He was a member of the Republican Committee until 1900. From 1870 to 1885, Desdunes worked for the U.S. Customs Service in New Orleans as a messenger and as a clerk. He also worked at the Customs Office from 1891 to 1896 and from 1899 to 1912. In 1880, Desdunes was appointed assistant cashier of the New Orleans Custom House by Collector Algernon Sidney Badger. In 1891, Desdunes was appointed chief clerk of the Subtreasury in New Orleans. In 1908, as a part of his Customs Department duties, Desdunes was supervising the weighing of cargo on a ship when granite dust blew into his eyes, blinding him. He retired the following year and moved to Omaha, Nebraska, to live with his son, Daniel, who was a musician and activist there. Civil rights activism. In the 1870s, Desdunes became involved in the pro-black rights Young Men's Progressive Association. As part of the Compromise of 1877, most of the federal troops were withdrawn from the South, enabling white supremacists to work more freely to suppress black rights. In 1878, the association, with Desdunes an officer and Thomas J. Boswell as president, were active in condemning lynchings. Dozens of blacks had been killed in Louisiana in the 1870s. They noted the murders of Daniel Hill and Herman Bell of Ouachita Parish, Commodore Smallwood, Charles Carroll, John Higgins, and Washington Hill of Concordia Parish, Charles Bethel, Robert Williams, Monday Hill, James Stafford, Louis Postlethwaite, and William Henry of Tensas Parish. In 1884, Rodolphe and his brother, Aristide, as well as Paul Trevine, Arthur Esteves, and Louis-André Martinet, as a part of a group called L'Union Louisianaise, reopened the Couvent School. Both Desdunes brothers served on the board of directors, and Rodolphe also taught. In 1887, a French-language weekly paper was produced in New Orleans under the same name, L'Union Louisianaise, with Eugene Lucy president, Homer Plessy vice president, Rodolphe Desdunes recording secretary and solicitor, Pierre Chevalier treasurer, and O. Bart solicitor. In 1889, Martinet formed the Republican newspaper, the Crusader, and Desdunes was a frequent contributor. Publishing in both French and English, the Crusader took up the civil rights cause. Desdunes was a part of the American Citizens Equal Rights Association of Louisiana in 1890, protesting to the state assembly against legislation that imposed second-class status on blacks. He also wrote for other papers in Louisiana, such as the Business Herald and Donald Sonville, in 1904. Comité des Citoyens. Desdunes was incensed by the 1890 Separate Car Act, writing in an 1891 letter to the editor in the Crusader, among the many schemes devised by the Southern statesmen to divide the races, none is so audacious and so insulting as the one which provides separate cars for black and white people on the railroads running through the state. It is like Aristide, Rodolphe and Daniel Desdunes, Louis Martinet, Eugene Lucy, Paul Bonseigneur, L. J. Joubert, P. B. S. Pinchback, Cesar Antoine, Homer Plessy, and others formed the Comité des Citoyens to organize black civil rights efforts. Rodolphe enlisted his eldest son, Daniel, to violate the act to allow for its challenge in the courts. On February 24, 192, Daniel boarded a train bound for Mobile, Alabama. While stopped at the corner of Elysian Fields and Claiborne in New Orleans, Daniel was arrested. However, Judge John Howard Ferguson ruled that the Separate Car Act could not be enforced for interstate travel because the Constitution only granted the federal government the authority to regulate interstate travel and commerce. The Comité then challenged the law again, this time focusing on intrastate travel, and Plessy volunteered to break the law. Lucy, Bonseigneur, Rodolphe Desdunes, Joubert, and Martinet secured Plessy's release on bail that same day. When the case, Plessy vs. Ferguson, finally reached the U.S. Supreme Court in 1896, it was found that Plessy's rights had not been violated, Desdunes writing, "Our defeat sanctioned the odious principle of the segregation of the races." Comité des Citoyens activists Albion Turgi and James C. Walker defended in both cases. About that time the Comité and the Crusader both disbanded. Historian and poet death. He lived in his own house in Omaha with his wife, and died on August 14, 1928 of cancer of the larynx. His remains were sent to New Orleans, and he was interred in a family tomb in St. Louis Cemetery No. 2.